What's the best moment you've ever had playing a game? Just think about it for a second. We all have that one game or that one moment in time that stands out above the rest. Maybe you finally climbed your way through the League of Legends rankings and hit Diamond after years of struggling. Maybe you and your friends just stayed up all night playing Halo 3 in the hardest difficulty and you just beat that son of a gun. Or maybe you just battled Red on top of Mount Silver. Whatever it is, you know that feeling I'm talking about, right? That euphoria of an experience you know you can just never quite have again. But something that just sticks with you and you'll just remember it for years to come. And if you're anything like me, you play games for those core memories forged from the excitement of achieving something you were working on for so long. Competitive games, Souls-like games, roguelikes, anything that made me earn my wins just hit the right spot. Let me tell you about something that I think could give everyone that feeling. Look at this game right here. I'm sure a lot of you recognize it. Good old Final Fantasy XIV. That dumb weeb game that only guys pretending to be cat girls play, right? To say I have a few hours in this game would be a bit of an understatement. Now, you might have a preconceived notion about this game, I get it. I was someone who tried the game out in Stormblood a couple expansions ago, played through about 20 levels, and I was so bored out of my mind. I was genuinely convinced I would just never touch it again. The story of how I eventually fell in love with the game is one for another day, but what if I told you that I think no matter who you are, there is something in this game that is that once-in-a-lifetime gaming experience? One of those core gaming memories, let's call them. Actually, there's about 5 of them as of this video. I'm talking about Ultimate Raids, the highest difficulty of raid tier in the game. And with a world first race for the most recent Ultimate going on, the Omega Protocol, you might have heard something about it recently. I understand that for maybe a lot of you have clicked on this out of curiosity. You've already decided, man, MMOs just aren't for me, and I get it. But even if you know you couldn't or wouldn't touch this game, or even this content, maybe you'd at least like to know why I think me and so many others think it's just so damn good. Let's back up a second. For those of you who might not be familiar with Final Fantasy XIV, or even how Ultimate Raids work, what the hell is an Ultimate Raid? You've probably heard people at least talking about them if you're in the MMO sphere, but I know I had no idea what the hell they actually were before I started doing them. To keep a long story short, it's a boss rush of sorts. You fight multiple bosses broken up into phases of one continuous fight that typically lasts about 17 minutes on average, and to make things even funner, there are parts of the fight that if even one person out of your group of 8 makes a mistake, you are guaranteed to wipe and have to go back to the very start. This can happen 5 minutes, 10 minutes, even 15 minutes into the fight. There will be points where you're likely to wipe, and right back to the start you go. To say that Ultimate Raids put most video game bosses to shame would not be an understatement in any way. These things can be rough, especially the newest ones that expect near flawless gameplay. Bear with me a few minutes, let me put something into perspective for you. Let me introduce you to one mechanic in one of the current 5 Ultimate fights. It's called Heaven's Fall Trio in the Unending Coil of Bahamut Ultimate. This takes place in the first Ultimate that was released all the way back in October of 2017, and it's a mechanic that would go on to become one of the most iconic mechanics in any Ultimate fight. Let me explain how this works. I'll try to make it understandable for people who even don't know anything about the game. Oh, and keep in mind, this happens about 9 minutes into the fight. Here's where it begins. 3 bosses will appear on the edge of the arena. 2 of these bosses will swoop through the arena in a diagonal line, knocking anyone who gets hit by them flying. You will likely die. So here's our first condition. In order to combat this, the team must find safe spots along the arena walls in order to avoid the sweeps. That's simple enough, right? Okay, let's keep going. Here's our next friend, the Twister. You see this little green blob right here? Welcome to another one of 14's favorite mechanics. So what's the consequences of popping one of these twisters? Yeah, everyone dies. It explodes, pushing anyone caught in the explosion so far that they'll likely hit the wall and die. Did I mention that the walls in Ultimate fights kill you if you touch them? Yeah. So let's recap this real quick. Still with me? We've got the swoops, we've got to find our safe spots, and you've guessed it, we'll have to deal with these twisters too. As the bosses begin to swoop into the arena, the cast for the twister will happen, meaning that everyone will have to step away from where they were standing in order to not murder everyone else around them. There's a few other details that happen here too, but this isn't a guide and I'm not trying to bore you, so let's keep it going, Okay, so the group has managed to dodge the twisters and the swoops. This is very doable, and the fight basically teaches you how to do this with earlier mechanics that kinda, you know, ease you into this kind of thing. Now here's where the most infamous part of good old Heaven's Fall comes in. These little guys right here are what we like to call towers. Towers must have one player standing in them when they resolve, or else they explode and do insane amounts of damage. In an Ultimate, this means, you guessed it, missing one of these towers practically means you're all dead. 8 of these towers are going to spawn around the edge of the arena, meaning every player in the team will be responsible for soaking a tower each. And to make things even funner, these towers will appear at random locations each time. There is a system that you can learn to understand who takes what tower, but again. Now you see this guy in the center right here? This huge monolith? This thing is gonna fall from the sky. Do you get it? Heaven's Fall. Fall from the yeah. It'll then knock everyone back a relatively small distance. Maybe those of you with a higher than room temperature IQ, unlike myself, have already deducted how we'll need to resolve this. Everyone in the party is going to have to stand at a distance that allows the monolith to knock them back more or less into their respective tower without touching the wall. And when you finally completed this part, this is where the true test of skill begins. Now I'm just shitting you. There's one more part of the mechanic that essentially requires people to run in roughly a whirlpool motion towards the center of the arena, and when they reach there a stack will go off that means everyone needs to be in it or people will probably die. And there you have it, that's Heaven's Fall. How long did it take to explain that? Like a couple of minutes at least? Yeah, all of that resolves in about 30 seconds in real time. Now again, I cannot stress this enough, this is one mechanic in one fight, in what is now considered one of the easier ultimates. Now, don't let me fool you, not every mechanic in an ultimate is made equal. Some, usually earlier into the fight or very late into the fight, are intentionally designed to be a little easier for those smooth brains of ours. Some mechanics require you to continually damage the boss, but many of the more intense ones like Heaven's Fall will usually give the team downtime to focus entirely on just resolving the mechanic, just do the movements. Comparing this stuff to something like a Souls game boss is not a bad line of comparison to draw. You know, when you finally start to get the boss's attack patterns down and when you're able to start avoiding their attacks and suddenly something that maybe took hours of your life that seems so impossible at the time suddenly starts to feel winnable. Ultimates are a weeks long, honestly most of the time months long journey, accompanied by that companion of feeling winnable the entire way. I've seen Raiden in Final Fantasy XIV be compared to dancing as opposed to like an all-out brawl, with how you have to memorize the steps in order to complete mechanics. And while that is often used as an insult, I think it's incredible, honestly. The feeling of finally understanding a difficult mechanic, bit by bit being able to solve it while doing the fight, and finally mastering it. That's what it is. It's a feeling of mastery. Knowing that all the effort you put in, all the frustration of dying to it over and over and over and over again was just worth it because now you know. It's a feeling I can only describe as having the third eye opened, and as the fight goes from a chaotic barrage of mechanics one after another to that streamlined, beautiful dance as all the places begin to fall into place and you notice everyone else around you getting it too. And when you finally do inch towards the finish line, that feeling, that damn feeling, I promise there's nothing like it. Just listen to this.
Surely this is it, right?
I don't know, just hit boss.
Hit the fucking boss.
Tree. Come on, come on, come on, please. Please, please, please.
Get it. Yeah, nice LB, nice LB! Yes, sir!
Nice.
Give me my fucking chair! Give me my chair! Give me my fucking chair! Yeah!
Please, come on, please.
Yes! Yes! Fuck yeah! Fuck yeah!
Oh my god.
皆さんご迷惑をおかけしました。お疲れ様です。いや、しゃぶしゃぶさん本当に。
Now, those of you watching this with a more jaded experience might think this is a little dramatic. How could grown men scream, shout, and sometimes even cry because they've cleared one raid in an MMO? There's no way. It's gotta be some kind of exaggeration, right? Like, these guys are just delusional. Well, I'll leave that up to you to make a judgment on. But really, just take a minute. Go back and watch that clip again if you want. Can you think of an achievement in a game that made you feel this way recently? In the past year? The past 5 years? Maybe you have, maybe not. All I can say is I've been playing games practically most of my life at this point. I've achieved high ranks in competitive games. I've gotten incredible loot drops. I've participated in official tournaments. And clearing an ultimate equals and honestly maybe surpasses most of those things. Now, for those of you who thinks this sounds like a grand old time, you might be asking, what's the reward for clearing one of these ultimate raids of yours? The hardest fights in the game would have to give something incredible, right? Some kind of gear that makes everything else pale in comparison. Well, yes and no. The reward has been staring at you in the face this entire time. It's one of these bad boys. Each ultimate raid has a thematic series of weapons attached to it. You're given one totem each time you clear the fight, and one totem can be traded for one weapon. These weapons are by far the flashiest thing in the game, each one standing out from a mile away, even among a sea of hundreds of players. And when you unsheath them, oh man. I understand that these might be a little overkill for some. They are essentially just sparkly weapon effects on steroids, but within the context of the game, when you see someone with one of these things, it just does things to you. But they're strong, right? Surely these things are the strongest weapons in the game. For a time, yes. When an ultimate fight releases, for that patch and that patch only, typically they're the best in slot, and often within that fight with the way Final Fantasy scales fights, the weapon will remain the best possible weapon you can use for that fight specifically. But for the rest of the game, they're quickly outmatched by other weapons that come out and replace the best in slot, as is the gearing system in most MMOs. That means these things are just practically very, very shiny trophies. Oh, and while this might not be as interesting for some of the unfamiliar viewers, you also get titles for completing each fight, each one in the Legend series. So, the Legend, the Ultimate Legend, the Perfect Legend, so on and so forth. So even if the weapons aren't really your thing, having the title can still be really cool. It really is just an all-encompassing experience that I could honestly talk about for hours. But I'm gonna cut things here. If you're already balls deep in Final Fantasy XIV, and you've been tempted by ultimates but never quite took the plunge, take this as your sign to start. And for everyone else, even if you know you would never play this game, or if you did even ever touch these raids, I hope if nothing more I've given you a slightly better understanding of just what is going on when you stumble upon a video of someone doing one of these ultimate raids, or even any of the raids in the game. I know that to the untrained eye, shall we say, that things can look a little chaotic. I think for that unfamiliar viewer, you'd never guess that an experience like this could be hidden within an MMO. I never did. And I truly think that this is just one of those things that is a true once-in-a-game-in-generation thing. I missed out on playing a game like World of Warcraft at its peak. You know how you'll hear people reminiscing about it, fondly speaking about how they'd give anything just to relive that moment from their favourite game again? Probably the reason why we have things like World of Warcraft Classic and Old School RuneScape. But inevitably, the unrelenting march of time moves forward and our favourite gaming times become memories. I think that in its current state, Final Fantasy XIV is in that part of its life right now. The game has been going from strength to strength and may only get better, but I feel confident in saying that any of the people playing right now will probably look back in the next 5-10 years and think, man, those were the good days. I think especially a lot of these people who are doing ultimates. And maybe you'd love them too. I'm fairly new to making content, so I just want to thank everyone for literally 1 billion subscribers. It's crazy to overtake Mr. Beast within a week. It's just incredible. I'll catch you next time, okay? Okay, bye.